I'm measuring a team member within their first 6 months of employment versus their first 6 years of employment, it's going to look different, right? Like you said, they're growing, they're advancing their skills, their abilities, they're stepping up to new challenges. Their role may evolve, especially as other team members have been added. So if we stay static in what we're measuring and managing today, we stay static in the results.
Welcome to Great Practice, Great Life by Atticus Incorporated. What if you could hang out with successful small and solo law firm attorneys, ask them about their successes and failures, their business strategies and mindset habits, then take an insight or two to guide your own growth in your practice? Each week, Steve Riley shares an in-depth look at how to work less while maintaining high client service standards, reduce your stress levels while growing your income, and find time to make changes when you are time-starved. Steve is a lawyer coach for more than 20 years and a former trial attorney. His goal is to provide strategies to help you balance your lives and grow your practice. Now, here's Steve.
Hi, it's Steve Riley. Welcome to this episode of Great Practice, Great Life. And today, it's a great day for me because I get to hang out with one of my favorite practice advisors, Lori Pulvermacher. Lori, how you doing?
I'm great, Steve, always.
You are great always. It's one of the reasons I like to hang out with you. So today's conversation is a result of feedback from a prior conversation we had about onboarding.
Yeah.
And coaching and advising lawyers is a difficult thing. I've been doing it for almost 25 years now. I'm a recovering litigator, ran a estate planning practice, and a lot of lawyers would ask me, what's the shortcut? What's the tip? What's the technique? How to do this? I could literally give lawyers my hard drive, and they would never implement things as I designed them or how I recommended or how I answered. They would say, look, I took your thingy, your checklist, whatever it was, and I fixed it for you. And here's it back to me. No charge, no charge. I fixed it for you. Here it is. Because I didn't think it worked well. Right. Did you try it? No. I see. So this thingy that you fixed for me, I did for a decade and refined it like 100 times. And it works very, very well. But you never took it for a test drive, but you were kind enough to fix it for me. Yeah, I thought you needed the feedback. So one of the things I've always been overly reluctant to do, and we're going to promptly do it today, is give lawyers a shortcut because they will always try and fix the shortcut. So, Lori, you and I are going to take a treacherous path today. It's treacherous, I'm warning you, because we actually had lawyers ask for a shortcut. After the onboarding conversation, we had lawyers ask for, okay, give me a cheat sheet, give me a shortcut. And that's what today's about, because I made a request of you and you've done a fantastic job. You hit my request out of the park like a home run. So why don't you talk about what the request was, what you did, and we'll walk people through a literal shortcut to how to onboard a great new team member.
Yeah, absolutely. In our previous episode, we talked about how essential it is that you have an onboarding plan, right? And to that, the response was, great. What does that look like? How do I do that? Do you have one? Right. So we put this together to provide that shortcut. And it's got those components that we feel should be in there. And I do believe that individuals will be able to take this and feel much more empowered to tailor it, to customize it, and to feel like they have a plan to bring on a new hire. It's such an essential element to have for the success of that new hire.
So it's perfect. So for the people that are listening, Lori's created literally a document, a plan that she calls the New Hire Onboarding Guide for Law Firms. And her first one was fairly comprehensive. This is her second or third version, which is really looking at the key components that she thinks are absolutely essential. So you can take this, you can download it. We'll have a link in the show notes. You can take it, download it, modify it for your law firm, or you can just take it the way Lori's designed it and start to run with it, use it, and then make modifications to it. So Lori, if you're okay, let's walk through the elements of it, and then people either can follow along or at the end they can download it and look at it. One of the big areas I want to spend a few minutes with you is on key performance indicators. I want to spend some time there. some of the other things I think are pretty obvious, but I want to spend some time with key performance indicator in our conversation. So take us through it. How did you design it and why did you design it this way?
Well, so it's designed, it's got the table of contents so you can jump around and go right into what you might be looking for. But again, this is designed to help our audience think more globally and holistically about bringing on a new hire. Because not only do we need a plan in place for how we're going to implement that and make sure that that's a really favorable experience for the new hire, but also for the existing team. You know, I know firms who've brought individuals on that they never told the other folks and they just showed up. That's kind of a strange and awkward experience for that team. So, what we want to do is think about all of the things that happen. One of the things that we stressed in our last episode is that this is not something that happens on day one. Onboarding happens before day one. So we start with some kind of pre-arrival tasks that should be included in this. And this includes, ensuring that they have a workstation, ensuring that if they need equipment or access to software, that that equipment or those licenses have been acquired, that we have a communication that goes to the new hire and to the existing team. And so what's really nice about this guide, Steve, is that there's even those email templates inside there. This is how you communicate. This is what you should include. And this is how to set this up for success for everybody involved.
It's a beautiful thing, Lori. What I want to do though is go back and I'll put the link to the prior episode we did. Let's do like a 15-second, 30-second explanation of why you think this is so important.
Really, you're setting the stage for that new hire and ensuring that there is a smooth transition and that everything's in place. In the last episode on this topic, we talked about how this is a competitive advantage for firms. Right now, this is a very difficult employment climate, and the acquiring of new team members is a monumental task within itself. But retaining, nurturing, training, and growing your team to its full potential is a very difficult task, and typically something that many of the attorneys that we've worked with, Steve, just this isn't their comfort zone. But it helps you to define what you need to do as a leader also to support the success of your new employee.
So that's great. So this is a blind spot for a lot of lawyers. It was and still is a major blind spot for me, which is a business skill. This is not a legal skill. You might be a great trial lawyer, great family law lawyer, but this is a business skill. And that if you're trying to scale your organization, finding, training, managing, and leading great people becomes one of your core business strategies. And then finding someone, onboarding them, bringing them on in a very powerful way, and helping them be successful is really what this is. This is kind of a playbook or a plan. Just like you would go to a hearing or a trial, you're not going to go in and wing it. And what you're saying, which is perfect, but it's the complete opposite of how all lawyers I know were trained, unless they went to a very large firm. Most of us walked in, handed a file. If we were lucky, we had a desk. I had a cardboard table, and you just went to work. And what you're doing is the complete opposite of that. You're saying, okay, this is a strategy. Here's why it's a strategy. Here's why it's important.
One thing that you mentioned in that last episode that I think is worth repeating, Steve, because this comes up in different ways with the attorneys I work with is, well, when I was their age or when I was at that point in my career, this was my experience. And that is not a crutch or an excuse for your team to have that same experience, right?
It's a tribal mindset saying when I was that age, I had to go out with a spear and hunt down an animal before I became part of the tribe. And it's a tribal mindset. It's not a business mindset. And this is a common issue. Well, and I deal with it all the time like you. Well, when I was that age, I totally understand. I had mandatory Sunday and Saturday hours. I totally understand. It sucked. That doesn't mean they have to, it's like a resentment, like you're resenting that you're giving them a better shot at being successful than you had. They're not suffering enough. They're not suffering enough. That's really what they're saying. They should suffer more, like I had to suffer more, which, we had two speakers, and then we'll move on. We had two speakers at the summit. One was Mike Bacalowitz, who spoke about his new book, The All In Team. And this was one of Mike's predominant points, which is How do you make it great for a new team member to join your firm? And then Glenn Finch talking about emotional intelligence. You want to be emotionally aware. And Glenn did some great statistics. We're going to have him on an episode to talk about it. But lawyers are intellectually sharp, but emotionally not so much. In comparison to society at large, we are emotionally stunted human beings because it's like an athlete. We've developed our right hand, our analytical skills, and that's worked really well. But we've never developed our left hand, which is the emotional skills. And the really successful lawyers, both running large firms, getting great settlements, getting great resolutions for the clients, are ambidextrous. They're intellectually and emotionally smart, which it's one thing to develop those IQ, but it's hard to develop those EQ skills. So,
Steve, before we leave suffering, many of our attorneys might have experienced suffering earlier in their career. They may still be experiencing suffering. They're definitely going to keep that suffering going if they don't give attention to onboarding. The acquisition and retention of your team is difficult. And so this is an area that you cannot neglect.
it's awesome. It's great. So a lot of lawyers are still sharing their trauma, sharing PTSD from what it's like to be. I just did it as a new lawyer, and then consequently, the price that you're paying is continuing to suffer for not pivoting your strategy. So the knucklehead you went to work for as a young lawyer treated you like crap and didn't have any onboarding process. So your current strategy is to do the same thing, which is not exactly a market dominant strategy. It's not exactly a good strategy. In fact, it's costing you a lot of money. So as you listen to Lori and you listen to this, be open to the possibility that what if I just tried it once with one new team member and see how it works? Just try it once and we'll do it. You don't have to do it amazing. You just have to do it 10% better than what you're currently doing, which is probably not anything at all.
Well, and that's why we developed the guide, right? Because it's going to shortcut this for you and give you those components and elements. And again, I think organically as you go through the guide and think about how you would apply this to the role that you're hiring for and the firm that you have today, it will provide even more insights into how to be a better leader, again, organically.
Perfect. So for the people that are on YouTube, I'm going to perhaps show this guide while we're going along, or actually I'm going to have Grace put up parts of the guide as you talk along. So she'll put up screenshots of it. So if you're on YouTube, you can glance at it. Lori, talk us through it. Walk through the elements, please.
All right. So we talked about, obviously this starts before day one and what are the components and the checklist that we want to go through to make sure that we're prepared for that and that we're setting a good stage. And you brought up Mike Michalowicz's session at the summit. He gave me even more ideas, and those aren't necessarily reflected in this guide, but this doesn't have to be an in the box consideration. How do you celebrate the new hire, make that day memorable and exciting for them, and how do you again set it up for success so that you are preparing them for not only what today looks like, but for what the next several weeks look like. And that's where this guide is not only helpful for you to create that onboarding experience, but to give transparency to the new hire so they know what to anticipate and they know how they're being measured essentially as well. And a lot of the things that we want our new hires to learn, to do, to be able to manage or own in the future starts in the infancy, right? They don't gain all that knowledge, they don't have all that confidence on day one, but giving them a preview of what's going to come over the next 90 days helps them start putting those actions into place and create those behaviors and skills.
I think it's fantastic. So I'm going to, if it's okay, I'll just ask you a couple of questions on why you think these are important. So week one, onboarding essentials. So you have two things here that I think are very, very great. One is introduction to the legal service area processes. Say more about that.
Well, and again, this is going to depend on how much your team member comes or how much knowledge and experience they have. Have they previously worked in the legal space or not? But no matter, I've worked with so many firms that say, I'm so disappointed because they had such great experience. They worked for this firm or that firm, and now they come here. It's not the same. The way in which you execute the work that you do, your types of clients, the service area that you're in, it's not a rubber stamp application of it. And so, and we also don't want to make assumptions that they know certain things about the legal process or the legal process through the way in which you execute that work. Your team is going to be far more capable and again, confident when they have a more holistic understanding of the process as a whole and not just their narrow area in which they're responsible for.
Okay, I'm going to highlight a key word for those of you that are listening: process. So the problem that you have with an experienced legal employee, someone who's an associate, partner, legal assistant, if they've got experience in another law firm, they may have legal knowledge experience, but they have different process experience. And process is how you apply the legal knowledge to your client situation. And so this is where lawyers are blind. They're really, really blind to this. So this is the joke about lawyers when grow with AI. They're like, well, where do I start to apply AI in my practice? Show me your process first and we'll pick a spot. But what do you mean, show me my process? Like, how does a client begin and how does a client end? What's your process look like? So this is great. Stage 2 of this I really like because you have hands-on training for key duties. What does that mean?
There's probably going to be some key opportunities to have them actually conduct the work and then be able to check the results of that. There's also probably going to be a lot of opportunities for them to shadow other team members in that. So we want to keep in mind that there are different learning styles. Some of us learn through auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. And typically, especially for adult learners, a blend of those three learning styles is going to be helpful in retention and understanding. A lot of times we teach and we train in a way that is in theory, right? We give information, we give the auditory, or if we have a guide, hey, here, read this, and now you just get it, right? We have to take theory to application. Okay, we talked about the process. Here's what it looks like. Here's the result of that. Let's check this. So, again, it's considering learning styles and what's going to aid in the greatest retention. We have a retention curve when we're learning as well. And again, we're talking about adults and professionals here. And so there usually needs to be multiple passes and multiple ways in which we're absorbing the material for us to have strong retention and confidence.
So this is great because you're not waiting for them to make the mistake and you to find out about the mistake and you think they're incompetent. What you're doing is trying to coach them through the issues and train them in advance on how do you do certain things. The two elements that you also put here, and I'm just going to hit these briefly before we move on, which is how does a CRM work, your case management system? How's your billing system work? Teaching the billing system. Who is their mentor? Who do they go for problems and help, on how does this work? What do I do here? It's great. It's fantastic. So let's move to the first 30 days, which you consider foundational knowledge and initial responsibilities. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. So the first 30 days, again, this is just a lot of, initial introduction to things. What I want to kind of just preface that with is each one of these sections or each period of time has a definition of success. And so if you were to fast forward and say, today is day one, or they haven't even come into the office yet, we haven't even started, but within the first 30 days, if they can do these things, if they understand these things, that's success, right? And because oftentimes we are hiring behind the pendulum, meaning we should have hired months ago, years ago, we're just now doing it now. And we're just so anxious for them to just get in and start doing it. I always strongly encourage the attorneys that I work with to slow down in order to speed up. By throwing everything at them, you are not testing them on how quick they are on their feet or how great they are at problem solving or what quick learners they are. All you're doing is setting them up for frustration and failure and likely turnover for your practice.
I've heard that somewhere before. I like that. Slow down to speed up. I like that.
Yeah, no, it's been a common theme I've been throwing out recently.
I like. So under key priorities, let's give an example here for the first 30 days. How do you know successful? So how do you know, and this, if you're okay, I'll read them.
Yeah.
And then you give feedback why you thought this was important. So, if you're listening and you're trying to figure out, okay, what does first 30 days success look like? Now, when I was designing 90-day onboarding, I wanted a team member to be financially productive within 90 days. So if I'm designing this for myself, I know in the first 30 days, I want them, and this is what you put, successfully manage 1 to 2 small tasks like document preparation, client correspondence, and define 2 to 3 measurable goals with supervisors. So talk more about that. What if you can increase your net income by 10% without taking on more work, increasing costs, and without working longer hours? The majority of lawyers are tied to the billable hour as their pricing model. The billable hour is an untapped area for improvement. So as I look at trying to help you, other lawyers, grow their practice and increase their income, we have designed a new virtual workshop called Level Up Your Billable Practice, Unlock Hidden Revenue, and Maximize Your Time. It's happening on February 27th, 2025 from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Now, it's a virtual workshop. You don't have to travel. You don't have to do anything other than protect the time. Now, the good thing about this is not just for you as the practice owner. We've designed this workshop that if you have anyone in your practice, whether it's a team leader, an associate attorney, a paralegal, that bills by the hour, they can come to this workshop and up-level their game to improve their game. Now remember, our goal's modest. We just want to see a 10% improvement out of this workshop. I'm personally leading this workshop because a lot of what I did in my practice, both as a coach and a practitioner, was billable work. My experience is that if you can just do 3 or 4 things to improve a billable practice, you can increase the net income or gross fairly significantly. So think of this as a 5-hour intensive training program for your law firm, an investment of both time and money to improve the outcome of your billable practice. During the workshop, you're going to learn how to capture every billable hour you work. We're going to talk about how to raise rates without losing clients. We're going to talk about best practices, how to improve efficiency, reduce time, and improve cash flow. So if you're a contingency fee lawyer, a fixed price lawyer, this workshop's not for you. This is just designed for lawyers that have a billable element of their practice. So if you got a friend that you would like to recommend that to, that's great. By all means, do it. So if you're ready to stop leaving money on the table or, have that leakage that occurs in the billable practice, you can either visit our website or you can register immediately from the link in the show notes, and you can save $100 off of it if you use the following code, podcast100. So let's make 2025 a great year for you by investing in your practice and kicking up that billable hour element.
So the goals can be very specific around a measurement as far as number of things that they're doing or, a ratio, but usually within the first 30 days. And that's why I love a guide like this. It doesn't even have to be, I have to come up with some KPI, a key performance indicator, or metric. It can just be, can we check the box against this? Okay. And again, the CRM system, the billing system, things that they're going to be using, having that confidence and the ability to demonstrate how they're going to use it. Okay, I think those two are really good examples because all too often we say, oh, here's my system. We use Lawmatics. Here's the Lawmatics tutorial library. Go and watch videos. And those videos are going to be helpful to understand, but it's not the exact application in your practice. So there's a disconnect there. So again, the shadowing of things and the ability for them to demonstrate might be some of those measurable goals, right? Again, 2 to 3. We don't have to overwhelm them, but we have to identify that we're moving in the right direction.
And it's important because you want to know if this person can learn, they can apply. So what's the most important thing that you want them to know in 30 days and apply in your particular practice? Now, if you're a team leader, you're probably going to have different measurements than if you're a lawyer. And most of the time, I want my team leads, if I've got a team leader in a law firm, to guide this process because the team leaders will be more patient, more skilled, and more empathetic, and also understand the system better.
And quite frankly, have more capacity to do that.
And more capacity, and we could keep going why they're better, but preferably team leader to do this are more skilled and senior team member. Now, if you are bringing someone else like a team leader or a senior team member, we want to make sure that we're bringing someone that is going to be good representation of your culture not the yeah, right. Not
That's
not
a
the
cringeworthy statement there, Steve,
yeah,
because
so well, talk about it because I think we're gonna say the same thing. Go ahead.
well, so I have a few firms I'm working with right now who are actively hiring and adding new team members on. And a big piece of that is because one, yes, they have gaps, but two, they have some shortcomings in the existing team. And when we bring on a new individual and then we just throw them into either a subpar performance or toxic culture and have that culture be the training and the source of information, we're gonna carry those same habits and those same frustrations over to the new hire, right? I mean, we've all know that there's probably circumstances where somebody comes in and says, "Well, this isn't the way we're supposed to do it, but this is the way I do it," or "You don't have to worry about this that because the attorney never checks it, or they're never going to go in here, so don't worry about that." Those things do carry over, right? And so becomes a real sticky point for attorneys who go, "Well, I can't train them. I can't carve out this time." Well, again, then what experience are you bringing them into, and what is the reality that they're going to be able to be that rock star team member if you've had them trained by your subpar team members?
It is fantastic. So the two mistakes here, number one is that the law firm will take their least productive employee and probably their least good cultural fit and have them trained because they don't want to take the good people off what they're working on. And they give the really bad person the job of training the new person, which basically is poisoning them. Like you instantly just go and inject them with negativity and be done. Just kill them now. The second thing is the understanding and patience. So I went in and did a retreat a week ago, Lori, and it was extraordinary to me because I had 6, 8 lawyers, a couple senior paralegals, head of 2 or 3 departments, and we were working on trying to improve their estate planning process, like from beginning to end. And we get to one simple thing, which is how do the lawyers take notes in meetings? And of course, what the senior management was telling me and how it was actually occurring on the ground was radically different. And then I had 4 junior partners, basically all 4 of them taking a different approach. One saying, yeah, nobody follows that. That was one partner, junior partner, saying that's how one person does it. The other person goes, well, this is how I do it. And the third person goes, well, I do it this way. And of course, the fourth one's like, I didn't know we did that. Like, I didn't know that we did that. So, so one of the great things about this is if you have a good team member guiding and mentoring, they'll quickly see systems breakdowns and process breakdown, protecting the new person from the lack of compliance, let's say, and quickly reporting to the rest of the team, like, oh, wow, we got a gap here. I didn't notice this. Did anybody notice this gap? There's a big gap. So good work. Let's move on to the next segment because I think we can spend a lot of time on this topic. And there's a lot that you and I are seeing on so many different levels. But let's move on to the next topic, which I think, you can guide me on how you want to do this, is what we would you consider 60 to 90-day full integration. Like they're on board, they're now considered, quote, a team member, the training wheels come off, and you call this advanced client engagement. And of course, there's changes depending on your role inside the firm. But talk me through your thinking and strategy here.
Yeah. So again, this guide is going to give you some specific examples, and it might not match the role in which you're hiring for. So, but the idea here again is specificity. Clear is kind. We've mentioned that before by Brene Brown. But what we want to do is ensure that there is that graduation. I refer to this as phases oftentimes with firms that are hiring. What does phase one look like? What do they have to be able to do in those first initial days, the first initial month, right? By the time we get towards that 90-day, we want that full integration where they are somewhat autonomous in certain activities, not completely, but also that they're able to own and manage and gain confidence, right? And that's why when we look at it in phases and we grow them into the role, we're naturally going to infuse more confidence, more comprehension, and a greater trust with the team, with the process, with the owner, that they can raise their hand and say, hey, I don't get this, or can I take another pass at this? So that we're not losing them along the way. And again, that build of trust and confidence is really important.
I had a thought that I want your advice on because as we're wrestling with this, I would anticipate some of your longer team members, longer employed, longer participating on the team, might have some resentment towards a kinder, simpler, guided training process. How would you handle that?
This actually just came up a few weeks ago when I was chatting with a firm, and they had an existing team member that said, I never got onboarded that way. And so that resentment is real. And so, again, it's not a crutch or an excuse for why we wouldn't do this, right? We can correct our wrongs. We can learn from things that didn't work and improve them for the next time, right? So I think you just have to be transparent. And again, lean into trust, empathy, EQ with your team and say, yeah, that sucks. Sucks for you. What's worked really well is that you have thrived, or that that you've been able to be an impactful individual in this firm despite the onboarding, despite my lack of preparation, despite my approach to this.
Yeah. So, and your position is basically, because I'm thinking about it from an Atticus perspective. I think about it from I have another business that's in the real estate space. If I had somebody say that today, I think I would say, I'm sorry. Like, yeah, we totally blew it. We totally, utterly blew it. And I'm getting better. Like, I'm getting better. I'm committed that no one else has to go through the brutal suffering that you went through, that I put you through because I was clueless. Like, I didn't understand what I'm doing. I'm trying to get better. Please help me make this a better place so that someone doesn't have to go through the same crappy lack of onboarding process that you went through. So we can make it a better place and a better culture so we can have better team members so they don't have to go through the crap that you went through.
Absolutely. And further, if there are still gaps or areas that you feel you need more support or training on, let's identify those and let's get, a training roadmap developed for you.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific because you're basically more than likely they've got a complaint that they're not getting support in some area. And you're like unaware of the complaint. This is the psychic problem. You should have known. Should I've known the psychic problem? It I guess it's assumed knowledge, right? Let's talk about, if you're okay, let's switch to key performance indicators and let's talk a little bit about that because this is a big one for me. And I think if I'm designing this is where I probably have to spend most of my thinking. Like I have to really think through if this person's a financial producer, either billable rate, fixed, price, or contingency, how do they fit inside the business revenue production system that we currently have? And how do I train them and coach them up to be successful if that's their role? So let's just focus on that role because it's going to be too hard to talk about how to become a new team leader. It's going to be too hard, I think, to talk about how to be a marketing assistant or a marketing director or intake specialist. So let's just focus on something that probably going to.
That's where I'm hoping this guide will be that helpful item for them, Steve, because there are multiple different examples of KPIs that you can use for a variety of different roles in this. And some of them are more difficult to create those very specific metrics, if you would. But there's a lot of ideas in there.
So if you're listening to this particular conversation and you're like, well, it's not relevant to me because of this. I think the strategy is totally relevant to you. This particular measurement may not be relevant to you, but the fact that we're measuring is the strategy. So I want you to listen from the perspective like, well, I have an immigration practice, or I have this practice, I have that practice. And I've said this and I continue to say it, and it makes no sense, but it'll probably make sense when you explain it back to me in about a year, Lori. There's really three different revenue models inside law firms. Hourly, I don't care if you're doing family law or commercial, it's hourly. And they basically operate the same. They do different stuff, but they operate the same. Contingency, I don't care if you're disability, Social Security, car accident, med mal, stuff you do is different, but how you get paid is the same. So the financial measurements and the operational measurements are the same. And fixed, I don't care if you're charging up front for immigration, criminal, DUI, elder law, estate planning, same financial measurements, different type of factory, but you get paid the same way and you process different types of law, but cases are basically processed the same way. Now, there's lawyers right now, one's they're probably holding on their steering wheel going, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. The whole world's turning upside down for me right now. It probably should because you're looking at it from an inside out paradigm. You're not looking at it from an outside in paradigm. So your KPIs will shift depending on your revenue model, depending on the person's role, depending on a lot of different factors like what they're doing and their key player, the key playing spot they have in your machine. But the strategy is what are you going to measure and why it's important. So I just want to set the stage for this because people are going to get all tied up. Oh, I'm hourly rate. Oh, you don't understand. I'm hourly rate in family law. This is how it has to work. And I'm like, I heard it like not once, but like 10,000 times. So not just picking on the family law lawyers, but anyone who does billable hour. So walk me through this, and then I've got I want to save a few minutes for rebuttal, and then we'll talk further. Go ahead, please.
All right. Well, again, the guide outlines a variety of different KPIs that you might be using that could be applicable to different roles. So staying with that associate, I think, Steve, is what you said you wanted to kind of focus on with the billable hours again, there's certain metrics. But before we dive into some of the specifics on these KPIs, I just want to give some, you know, additional guidance. We can't manage what we're not measuring, right? And again, this is the clearest kind. If I can provide a dashboard for my team member and they know how they're being measured, they know what is important or what's driving success for their role and the practice, that creates a more autonomous, more self-managed individual, which I think most of the leaders would like to have, right? So we don't want to get in the weeds on the supervision. And we can avoid that when we've created the dashboard, when we've created the indication of what we're going to be looking at and how we're measuring success. So, there's certain measurements that are more clearly defined, billable hours.
So what you're referencing is a concept that came out of the Industrial Revolution that started a whole paradigm of thinking. And what you're calling this is called Pearson's Law. And I'm going to read it word for word. When performance is measured, performance improves. When performance is measured and reported back, the rate of improvement accelerates. So this comes from a book that's, I don't know, probably 100 years old now called Scientific Management. And Pearson started measuring shovels, like how long it took to fill a boiler with coal. And he was measuring how many shovels should a employee take in a coal factory. And then he came up with the current size of shovels because back then the shovels were bigger. And he realized that if he did a smaller shovel, he could do more shovels and be more effective in filling the thing. So as you listen to this, I want you to realize there's two elements: measurement, feedback, and quite frankly, frequency of feedback.
Correct. There has to be an accountability piece to this. Otherwise, this becomes yet one more thing that says, yeah, we've been told this, we've been asked this, we've been informed, but there's been no feedback loop, no accountability. There's no consequence if I don't meet those metrics.
Exactly. So, and then I'm dealing with this in a law firm. I just want to spend a moment here, and I hate to belabor the point, but I worked with a firm where they measured the KPIs daily, and the KPIs were publicly put. They were public on a giant flat screen TV in an area where everybody saw everyone's performance daily, like daily KPIs were measured. Now, it takes a whole level of thought and strategy to understand what you're going to measure for daily KPIs. And this was a good sized firm. This was a firm of, I think at the time, about 150 team members, about 20 to 30 lawyers. And they did one thing and they did one thing beautifully. The second thing is for some people, they're thinking, well, we do measurements. We have X billable hours. And I'm working with a firm where they've onboarded a new lawyer and they basically did, here's the file, here you go. And this lawyer came from the public sector and they didn't have billable hours. And so this lawyer figured that if he billed 2 hours a week, he was kicking ass and taking names. And his goal wasn't 2 hours a week. It was significantly more. But he worked for 90 days, but so before someone pointed out to him and gave him the feedback that he's woefully behind on his billable hours. And like they gave me, he thought it was a suggestion, like, 36 or 38 billable hours a week was a suggestion, not a target, because he came from he came from the government. So there are a lot of things that were considered performance measurements.
But it's so important because
Yeah.
some of the firms do have in their mind what they would like to see
Where
happening
where is it
in their mind.
in their mind?
And I just had this conversation last night with a firm I'm working with. And I've asked them, is this documented? Is this part of their employment agreement? Where does this exist? And they said, well, I know we've talked about it.
Oh, they should know. This is
We've
psychic.
talked about it.
They
Did
should
you
know.
document those conversations? No. So where is it that it indicates this is their responsibility or this is the metric in which they will be measured and managed against?
So clarity begins with you. And if you lack clarity, you can't coach people on their performance. This is why being in a group program, this is why working with a coach, this is why driving to clarity. And it drives a lot of great decisions, great thinking, but it also makes a lot of our clients crazy, like they're crazy.
And you're going to have to carve out the time to have these feedback conversations and provide that. Otherwise, again, you're only hurting yourself in your success potential of retaining and nurturing this new hire.
Well, this is an important conversation from the perspective that are you investing in growing your practice as a business owner, as a leader, as a thinker? This is an investment of time, an investment of strategy, an investment of thought. If you're too busy, it's because you're avoiding the hard work, the heavy lift. And the easy thing to do is to go back and do your email and practice law and then complain in 2 years that nothing's changed.
And there's no good employees out there.
Yeah, there's no good employees out there because you didn't change. You didn't change. I Mike McAllowitz and I had this conversation at Summit over breakfast, and it was absolutely hysterical. And he was asking me questions like, "What do you think the biggest challenge lawyers have that we coach?" And I said, "Oh, that's easy." And I think he was expecting time management or this or that, the other thing. And I said, "Change management. Understanding first what you need to change and understanding how to lead your team through change. Change management is really what we do at the end of the day." And the reason I say that is that the work that you're doing here is very important work. And if you're trying to make a successful, scaling up, market dominant firm and you want to sustain cash flow and reduce stress and have people be self managing and reduce your frustration, what Lori's recommending and the work that she's trying to get you to do with your key performance indicators is very basic. What are you measuring? Why are you measuring that? Why is that important? How often are you measuring it? And are you coaching, training, and developing people to measure it? So, Lori, I really appreciate the work you're doing. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but clearly this is a hot topic for me.
Well, and for our attorneys as well, because again, this comes up. They know that they need to measure, but it's like, but what? What is it? Again, give me the shortcut. Tell me exactly what to do. So this provides you with the framework for that. You will have to determine what data is available to you. And there may be shortcomings in your technology, in your dashboards, in your reports that will also need to be addressed so that you can extract this kind of information.
And I'm going to warn you, if you're listening to this and say, what I'll do is just copy my friend's KPIs. Here are the two things I learned about copying your friend's KPIs. Number one, most of your friends don't know what they're doing. They really don't. Very few lawyers that I've met over the years have run successful, well-managed practices using key performance indicators. I could probably think 10 to 20 at the most that I know well that are running good firms and their key performance indicators make sense. So having me, I'll use an example. Craig Goldenfarb, who's my friend, his wife Colleen also spoke at Summit, did an amazing job, just amazing. Craig's got some sophisticated key performance indicators, very sophisticated, but he's got 80 something employees. If I opened up a PI shop today and stole Craig's key performance indicators, me and my new assistant, which was what Craig was 25 years ago when he started working with Atticus, our key performance indicators would be radically different. Craig may have 1,000 key performance indicators that he's measuring on a daily basis on his dashboard on the wall of his CEO office. But when you're running your first practice and you're opening up your shop and you're brand new to practicing, your key performance indicators may be how many cases came in this week, right? How many cases are in process of settlement? How many cases are here? What's my average value per case? So be careful here. This is where you don't want to cheat and steal somebody's KPIs because their KPIs are radically different than where you might be in your practice and the type of practice. This is where the work begins. It requires you to strategically think through this. So I'm just going to give it as a big warning because I've seen it over and over and over. My second warning is your KPIs will change. So if it's you and a couple of staff, you have one set of KPIs. As you grow and you have a team leader and you have 6 to 12 people, you have different KPIs. And then we start to have team leaders managing teams. You have a whole different host of KPIs. So these things evolve because they are measurements, but they're measurements for performance. They're not religious principles. So you don't etch them in stone and say, oh, our KPI is this.
Well, and sometimes etch them in stone, you're not reaching your full potential either.
Perfect. But
So,
say more about that. Why would you say that?
well, so how I'm measuring a team member within their first 6 months of employment versus their first 6 years of employment, it's going to look different, right? Like you said, they're growing, they're advancing their skills, their abilities, they're stepping up to new challenges. Their role may evolve, especially as other team members have been added. So if we stay static in what we're measuring and managing today, we stay static in the results.
All right. So let's say that over real slow for the slow people. All right. Say it again.
If we stay static in what we are managing and measuring, we stay static in our results and our potential.
Right. So let me explain it this way and see if you and I are saying the same thing. One of the clients I personally coach is a top tier med mal lawyer, phenomenal lawyer, like considered one of the top 100 in the country. And he said, I need to hire a person to solve this problem on my team, like another team leader. And I said, that's great, but you're solving for a problem in your old practice when you were doing X revenue. Our goal is 2X. So what we need to do is be hiring for the 2X person and measuring their performance when your firm's now doing twice that. Because what you're doing is solving an old problem, maybe a new person fixing an old problem. But this requires some level of strategic thinking. You have to say, okay, where am I going? How's this person fit into that role? And how do I measure their performance in my future firm? So you have your past firm, your present firm, your future firm, and you're building, hopefully building for the future firm. And if you're trying to fix the old problem, you're just going to bring the old problem with you to the new, to the future firm, right? Is that what you're saying? Are we saying the same thing here?
I think we are, Steve. And again, it's the evolution of your business. And this is probably the stab in the heart, for so many that are listening right now going, wait, I have to figure out what my KPIs are initially and then figure out what future KPIs are going to be. And again, with anything in your business, this is refinement and evolution. We don't stay static.
Yeah, so the easiest way to think about that, it's not the same firm. If you're doing $500,000 a year and you're a solo and one support staff, you're measuring different things. If you're doing $5 million a year, you're measuring different things. So being in a position to reevaluate and re-examine your KPIs, while it looks like it's a painful thing, is actually a critical business skill that will support scaling up and success. So if you're actually having to reevaluate and re-explore your KPIs, celebrate. Don't mourn. This is a celebration because this is a byproduct of great thinking and great growth. So I know it sounds painful, but this is it's one of the critical skills, I think, for a market dominant player, because then you're able to manage people objectively. You're able to design compensation systems objectively. You're able to make and teach people how to be self-managing quickly. And that's ultimately the goal here, is of being a self-managing team to help have people perform. Lori, I'm gonna hit a couple other highlights and then we'll pull it to a close if that works for you. All right. So here's some other things that I loved about this. It's short. You have sample templates that are simple. You have some general tips for tracking implementation, which I think are terrific. You also enclose your outline or your proposed outline for a employee handbook or team member handbook, which I think is absolutely terrific. And then I think these are terrific. I think you did a great job. I want to thank you for doing this because you're in the trench every day helping law firms think about this. And you took the time to try and give somebody an easy button. The problem with giving them an easy button is that this is a template. It's not custom designed for the firm, right? Any final thoughts on this before we call it for the day?
Well, I mean, we've emphasized this throughout, but again, this is the time that must be spent and carved out, and that the leadership hat that must be worn. Get out of that technician role and step into your leadership role. But also, this is a guide through the first 90 days. Onboarding, training, evaluation of appropriate fit does not stop magically at 90 days. There's no magical component to 90 days. And if they're not a right fit, they're not making the progress or checking the boxes, you release them before that 90 days, right? So we want to make sure that we're being thoughtful about the way that we're bringing them on, but recognize that this is not, again, there's not a magic number around 90. We need to be evaluating them throughout and continuing to help them excel in their respective role.
Perfect. It could be 9 hours.
Yes.
Instead of 90 days, it could be 9 hours where you're like, ooh, wait a minute.
Right.
You interviewed brilliantly. You said you knew Word. One of the challenges a lot of employers are having right now is that people are taking the job description and then putting their resume into ChatGPT and saying, make this match the job description.
Well, but that's scary. That's
And
scary.
submitting the resume so it matches the job description. So people are then getting these interviews and they're saying, yeah, that's me, that's me, that's me. And then they're going in and saying, so, yeah, by proficient in Microsoft Word, I have it. I have it on my
It's on
computer.
my computer.
It's on my computer. By saying that I'm really good with Clio, I'm aware of it. I watched a Clio webcast one time. So
And
yeah.
again, those things, if you have the right person in place, they will learn and they will be able to excel in those. But that's where, again, it's so important to have the boxes. Like when I create an onboarding plan for a new hire, I literally am making it a checklist and I give a copy to the individual and say, we're working to check the box on this.
All right, Lori, thank you. Great job. Great work. I know you're slammed. I appreciate you getting on the show and talking us through this. I appreciate the hard work. I hope people are grateful community wide. So if you guys take this tool, don't hesitate to pop Lori an email and just say, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Don't send her an email saying, I fix it for you. Just fix it for yourself. But, but proper an email thanking her for the work and don't fix it for her unless you've tried it first yourself. I think I need therapy. Anyhow, with that, Lori, thank you so much for your work today.
Always an honor.
And I want to thank everybody that's listening. Thanks for being part of our great life and our great practice. We're grateful that you're here. If this episode was useful for you, don't hesitate to share it with somebody else, because I promise you, if you're thinking about how to onboard, if you're thinking and you create an onboarding process, you are that rare 1% or 0.5% of law firms. And if you have that type of mindset, that type of thinking, and that type of strategy, you'll ultimately, whether you like it or not, become a market dominant player, because what you're doing is a very strategic business skill. If you have a friend or a colleague that's struggling with their onboarding and they're complaining to you saying they can't find good people, text them this episode and say, listen to this episode. And because it may help them shift their thinking, and they can download this if they follow the show note links. And with that, Lori, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining this week's episode of Great Practice, Great Life. Please tune in weekly to get the next episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, like, and don't hesitate to share it with a friend who you think this episode can help.
With that, thanks, and I hope you enjoy next week's episode.